Later in the studio, it's Glenn Antizzo, the professor of political science, Mississippi College. Good morning, sir. It's good to see you again.
Good morning, Paul. Good to be back.
And this time I got the name right, didn't I?
Yeah, you did it perfectly.
So everybody's happy in the family. So.
Yes. Dad's listening in Florida this morning.
Very good. Here's one of the things that I want to talk about, because there's a lot of consternation on this one, and people saying, well, wait a minute, if Israel and Netanyahu did not lay the hammer down as he did, there was no way that these hostages, in the negotiation for these hostages, would be anywhere near the fruition that it's produced so far.
Absolutely.
And I mean, that's a very good point to make.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Look, Paul, as a general rule, it's always the losing side that wants the truce. And Hamas was pressing so hard to get, a truce, or maybe more accurately a ceasefire, that, yeah, absolutely. Had Israel not brought the hammer down in this way, I have no doubt in my mind that these people would still be hostages. The only negative of this is how much Israel seems to be giving up in order to secure these folks. But it shows the premium that the Israelis and the United States put on life. That we're willing to pay such exorbitant amounts in order to get our people free.
I can understand what they're talking about also when you look at the amount of lives that have been lost in the Gaza Strip because of what they had to do to get in there and root these people out. But I mean, you start looking at ground level in I'm nowhere near military, but you start looking at how complicated Hamas made this by interweaving their operation in schoolyards, in sensitive places that you would never think that they would be in.
Oh, yeah. No, they know that, again, that Israel plays by, civilized rules of war, and that they can rely on that and hide behind the skirts of women and children in order to avoid being hit. And the Israelis, I think, have provided some pretty good evidence that there is a nerve center underneath that hospital in Gaza. And but just going back to, the number of deaths in Gaza, let me just make a point about this. The information that the media is putting out there, almost without question, is stuff coming from the Gaza Ministry of Health. The de facto government of Gaza is Hamas. So basically, whenever you have this ministry putting out the numbers, it's Hamas propaganda. I'm not saying that a lot of people haven't been killed. I'm sure they have because of the way Hamas fights this war. But I think, you really got to take with a grain of salt the numbers that are being reported, because I'm sure that they're probably not nearly as high as are being reported.
This will not resonate with Gen Zs or Gen Xs or whatever, but it will with boomers. When it comes to disinformation, everybody wants to get into the act.
Oh, yeah.
To Randy. Listen, I've even seen some videos that went viral where they were staging some accidents, putting fake blood on some gurneys, rolling kids through the street. Then there was an actual siren, a warning went off, and they all scattered, and the person on the gurney got up and ran too. So, yes, disinformation is alive and well even on the Gaza Strip.
I think, again, people seem to forget. It's like in football. It's never the first guy who gets the flag. It's always the second guy who pushes back. Yeah. And I think that's what's happening with Israel. You really don't hear people talking anymore about the events of October 7th, except, some people from the Israeli administration. Other than that, this whole story has been turned around because, the Iranians and Hamas and Hezbollah are masters at this stuff in terms of spinning the narrative in their favor. And, of course, you've got a lot of people in this country who, I used to label them when I was in my younger days as the Blame America First crowd. I guess now it's the Blame Israel First crowd, who basically, don't want to be confused by facts and, just will talk about what's going on in Gaza as if the Israelis woke up one morning and decided to overrun the place.
Can't you say the same thing about Zelensky in the Ukraine?
In terms of?
In terms of making darn sure we continue sending him money as far as the progress he's making in the Ukraine.
Yeah, well, I mean, again, I don't fully trust in the information coming out of either side there. I tend to give greater weight to Ukraine because it's a state-controlled media over in Moscow. TASS is still the news agency back from the Soviet days. But yeah, I mean, obviously, Zelensky's got incentive to try to spin the narrative a certain way in order to make sure that the aid continues to flow. And the truth appears to be that on the ground, they're not making the progress they thought they were going to make, and they are beginning to run out of not just ammunition, but I was reading a report this morning that they're beginning to run out of bodies.
Really?
That they're having trouble getting replacement soldiers, and that means
Russia's already done that. I mean, Russia's had some problems also.
Yeah. And it was only natural that would happen with Ukraine. I mean, they've got a smaller population, and I'm sure that, as was the case with Russia, that a lot of people signed up to fight, but a number of people probably left when they thought they could.
What's the end game? Let's go back to Hamas.
Sure.
What's the end game for Israel? We're not talking about occupation, are we? Or how do you prevent? It's almost like Sicily. You if you want crime to go, you got to get the mafia out of it. And they've never been able to do that. How in the world can you have a safe Palestine where they can grow and progress and be an equal partner, even with the two-state deal? I mean, what's the end game?
I think that you need to pull out Hamas by the roots, and get them out of there.
Well, I mean, that's what they're doing,
right? Yeah, and I think I don't think the end game is going to be Israel occupying the place. There may be a brief occupation. You may remember back in 1982 when there was a war between Israel and Hezbollah. Excuse me, not Hezbollah. Israel and the Palestine Liberation Organization. Israel occupied about the southern third of Lebanon for a while. And then they withdrew, and they left control of South Lebanon in the hands of a Lebanese Christian militia called the Army of South Lebanon. And Israel used that as a buffer zone to keep groups like the PLO and Hamas at a safe distance away from Israel. I think what will end up happening here, this is just a guess, but the best educated guess I've got, is that they'll get rid of Hamas. And then they'll probably turn control over, I would think, to the Palestinian Authority on the West Bank and have Fatah take over the administration of Gaza, which is, not the ideal solution, but it's actually, I think, to be honest with you, Paul, I think that there's a really good chance for peace if you eliminate Hamas. Fatah always comes across as a bit more reasonable. I would much rather deal with, the leaders of Fatah. I can't think of I think his name is Abbas in the West Bank than I would with anybody over there. Because basically, if you think about this, when you're talking about Gaza, you're not really negotiating with Hamas. You're indirectly negotiating with Iran. And
but you mentioned it, and we'll get back to this on the other side of the break. If you're going to have lasting peace, you have to also take care of that equation because the instigators over there is Iran.
Yeah.
So you got to solve it on both fronts, from Hamas and Iran, before you have lasting peace. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah. No, I think that you do, and I think we are getting close to a boiling point with Iran right now. They are really pushing the envelope because they know this administration will not hit back. We've had. Something like 75 attacks on American facilities and only 3 retaliations?
Yeah. Also, a story this morning about a bunch of kids out there who were attacking a teacher for standing up with Israel. And the quote at the end of that story was, it wasn't so much, and this is what the aftermath of the evaluation, it wasn't so much about the issue of Hamas. It was the kids just looking for something to screw up. And I wonder how Dino Crecchetti music here for Glenn Antizzo, mio compare, professor of political science, Mississippi College. Do you know any Italian at all?
No, unfortunately, I don't. And here's the funny thing: my family immigrated here from Sicily in 1911. My grandfather was the first Antizzo born in the United States. His older siblings were born in Sicily. And my father loves telling a story about how when he was a teenager in the 50s, his grandparents my great-grandparents, who were, the ones who immigrated over here, they could not speak a word of English.
No.
And my father couldn't speak a word of Italian.
None of mine either. Well, here's the way assimilation worked, though. My grandparents, Nona and Nonas on both sides, who came over in 1906, one 1913. If you were caught speaking Italian in public, they would admonish you because they say, we are American, and they would say this in Italian because they couldn't speak English. They would say it in Italian, we are American, you speak American.
Right.
And then later on, my grandmother would always tell me, you need to learn some Italians because it's good to have two languages instead of one.
Yeah.
In case you had to go, and I forgot the word, sum saptra, whatever it happened to be, overseas. So they always had this mindset, if you had to go back to Italy to fight again, then you would know both of them. But it's a tremendous heritage.
Well, he told me that, his grandmother would, his parents left him with his grandparents one weekend, and he was going out with some friends, and my great grandmother was speaking to him in Italian, I guess, to tell him something, and he's just, yes, Nana, yes, Nana, yes, Nana.
Oh, we do enough, yeah. Well, and I knew quite a bit when I was young, but forgot a lot of it. But every once in a while, it just pops back to me. You heard the soundbite there of the couple who were offered a Bitcoin or $100 cash, and she wanted to take $100. I had a little bit of a dawning this weekend that I had to and I wanted to share it with the audience too. And I thought, here's a perfect guy because I'm not out and about with the younger generation. You are. And I'm hoping that this man on the street stuff that we played, that they had to go through 1,000 before they could find a few that were that dumb.
Right.
Then we have this situation in New York where we hear all of the videos there that are just too many on snatch and grab. And it's only about 327 people who are doing 20% of this. So is social media blowing things out of proportion to the point where if you're there on the ground, and I know you see a different caliber students, but your thoughts on this one, and I know we are always taught, please, don't gauge the population polls or what you believe is the prevailing winds, what you see on social media, because it does not extrapolate out to real life.
Right. Well, I being at Mississippi College, I'm sort of in a sweet spot of intellect. My students often come to class with information that I haven't even heard yet. Hey, Dr. Antizzo, what do you think about? And then I have to have them explain to me what the background of the situation is because they're so on top of the news and they're so interested that I'm sort of running behind. But then, when I was a student at Cornell, you have a lot of people that are basically whose minds have been warped by the faculty there, and that they take a steady stream of basically propaganda disguised as information, and so they come up with these twisted points of view in some cases. And I remember getting into spirited arguments in discussion sections in class with people who would just parrot some of the talking points that were put out by some groups. And then, of course, there's the general population where, I just heard something over the weekend where a third of people below the age of, I think, 30 get their information exclusively from TikTok, or at least primarily from TikTok. Yep. And that's a scary thought because, again, the Chinese are manipulating the algorithms in order to try to divide the country.
And they do it over and over and over. It's disinformation on steroids.
Yeah. No, it is. I mean, you couldn't come up with a much better tool to propagandize and to split a free and open democratic society than TikTok right now, I would think.
Well, and you start looking at what's going on as far as public education is concerned, and some of these kids are coming out of school. They're not bonded with the country. They're not bonded with anything, to be honest with you. Especially if it starts off with a single parent family. They're not bonded with a father. They're not bonded with anything as far as education. They go back to a gang leader for the most part.
Well, I think, people are looking for a sense of family wherever they can find it. And unfortunately, when you're in that kind of situation where you've only got one parent, and the one parent you're with is struggling to keep the household intact, and so is away from the house a lot because they have to earn the income, and the other one is gone and can basically drops out of the kid's life. The kid is looking for affirmation, and the kid is looking for a sense of belonging, and unfortunately, a lot of times they find that with their peers, or they find that in the worst case scenario with the gang. Yeah.
We know how to do it. It's a two-parent family, if at all possible. Get an education, don't get pregnant, and that's it. Get a good job.
Yeah.
And that works. I got to switch to the last few seconds that we have here. In taking a look at some of the things that are being said by this administration, you got to be low on the intellect pole to take this and run with it.
Because wages are rising, this Thanksgiving dinner is the fourth cheapest ever as a percentage of average earnings.
Now, I haven't done the math on that one, but she might be right. But the in meaning is that you paid less. For me, you paid less for this Thanksgiving bird and the fixings than you ever have.
Because wages are rising, this Thanksgiving dinner is the fourth cheapest ever as a percentage of average earnings.
Now, she did put in there because prices are rising. So does that negate the entire statement?
As we look ahead to holiday shopping, since last year, prices for toys are down about 4%. Used cars and trucks are down 7%.
Wow.
And TVs are down 9%.
Snatch 'em up.
Lowering costs for Americans continues to be the president's top economic priority. From strengthening supply chains to lowering energy and healthcare costs to cracking down on price gouging by banning hidden junk fees, President Biden's policy will continue bringing relief to American families.
Well, she got through it. What do you think?
Well, I mean, I know they keep talking about increasing wages, but I certainly don't know anybody who's gotten a raise recently. I know I haven't. So, look, I think that what they're trying to do is put a happy face on a bad situation, and they know that their numbers are in the tank. The president is in solid danger of losing. I saw recent polls that indicate that not only Trump would beat him, but Nikki Haley would beat him and DeSantis would beat him. So, they're trying to do anything they can to grasp at straws here. And, I don't think the American people are so short-memoried that they're not going to remember, that gasoline prices went up dramatically. They're back down now. But that's not him. That's because of the international markets. It happens at this time of the year that, people are traveling less. I mean, we just had a big travel weekend, but generally speaking, we're not traveling in the way we did during the summer. And so the gasoline prices do tend to come down at this time of the year.
Well, it is on him as far as the supply that from Keystone and places like that. But you are right. When it comes down, it's going to ebb and flow.
Right.
And we're getting an ebb on something that's going to flow very soon as we get closer to the holidays. So, and certainly in the first of the year. It is always a pleasure, sir. I thank you for coming in. It passes by fast.
It does, and anytime you'd like me to be here, I'd like to come back. I really enjoy this.
You got it, man. As always, Glenn Antizzo, the professor of political science.